Hello and welcome into the Fog.net podcast. My name is Michael Swain, the Kansas beat writer for 24/7 Sports. We're back with another podcast talking all things Kansas football, the bye week, recruiting, looking ahead to the final half of the season. Kevin Flaherty is here with me, and we're going to break everything down in what might not be our longest episode of the year, but I think there's a lot to dive into after what was a pretty busy week for KU, both I think in Lawrence with the team and also on the recruiting trail. So Kevin, bye weeks, I know you still got to do your national duties for 24/7, but how was the weekend for you without any Kansas football?
Yeah, it was a chance to watch a lot of other football, obviously, but my understanding is that you actually had some pretty nice plans and got to get away for a little bit. Why don't you tell the listeners what your plans were? It's a lot more exciting than me sitting around and watching college football.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to go down to Austin for the F1 race. I'm a big F1 fan. It fits in with the schedule, for me, where Saturday mornings, Sunday mornings, I'm working usually. So I've become a pretty big F1 fan. I was able to go and spend the weekend there. And I mean, look, Kevin, I only get probably 4 weekends a year that, or at least, kind of between August and, March, that I can go do stuff. And I tried to take advantage of this one. It was definitely weird though, like not having, service is terrible. I couldn't see what was going on the college football Saturday, and I'm checking in to see Iowa lose to Minnesota 12-10, and I'm remembering why. I'm happy I'm sitting and watching some cars go fast instead of watching terrible offense. And like Mississippi State, Arkansas 7-3. I feel like I dodged a
Yeah.
bullet sitting on the couch over the weekend. But yeah, some interesting football. Did you watch many of the Big 12 games? I kind of scoreboard
Yeah.
watched after.
Yeah, I watched some of them. There were some weirdly competitive ones. I mean, I'm not sure most of us expected that, Texas was going to have the trouble with Houston coming back and making that a game, and
Yeah.
certainly Quinn Ewers getting hurt with the grade 2 AC sprain, which Sark says he's week to week. Different people have said it could be Big 12 title game before he's back, and so somewhere in there is his recovery process. And then look, Kansas fans saw UCF. I mean, they saw UCF up close, and for UCF to throw that scare into Oklahoma in
Mm.
Norman the way that they did, and for those of you who don't know, who didn't watch, UCF scored the touchdown to basically bring it to within two. Went for the 2-point conversion. Had just an awful 2-point conversion call. Tried to go for a double pass and didn't get the second pass off. Got tackled for a big loss, and that was the game. But to go to
Mm-hmm.
Norman and lose by 2 points, nothing wrong with that, especially when you're a team that was down 24-0 to Kansas at halftime in Lawrence, and so solid showing for UCF, and obviously that game had a little bit of attention, I think, because of who Oklahoma has this week, the University of Kansas Fighting Jayhawks. So I
Yeah,
think,
well, that the end of that game for UCF was so Gus Miles on,
oh
right?
yeah,
You get in the position, and then the big play call comes, and you're just like, trick play. Here we
yep,
go.
oh yeah.
It's getting weird. Like, okay, let's not run any of the plays that we've used today to help us actually be in this game. Let's go here, Kevin. What's your philosophy on this? Because I've seen on the message board and
Sure.
on Twitter that I think fans are like, oh man, Oklahoma getting scared is not what KU needs after, heading into this week's game. What's your philosophy on that? Do you think that stuff matters?
Yeah, I think it does to some extent. I think the worst possible thing would have been for Oklahoma to lose.
Mm,
I think there's still a chance. We're all human. The players are human. I think there's still a chance that when you find a way to pull out a game like that and survive, you say, "Oh, it was just one of those nights," and you kind of go about your business sometimes,
mhm.
and don't maybe treat it with the seriousness that you should. I think obviously, if Oklahoma had absolutely run UCF, would that have probably been the better thing? I think philosophically, yeah. But the flip side of that, Swain, is everybody's chasing perfection, right? Like you're trying to get better every week, and you're trying to get to that point where you're operating at peak confidence, you're
Mm,
operating at peak efficiency, and all of that. And so that's the thing that people don't talk about is if Oklahoma came out and won that game 45-0, I'm not saying they wouldn't be confident going into the KU game or even overconfident. But if they're at a point where they're like, man, we've figured this thing out, we're really playing with peak, you don't want
yeah.
that either. And,
Yeah.
and so I think there are a lot of different ways to look at it. How about you?
Yeah, no, I totally agree, right? I think best, like, purely from a Kansas perspective, well, I think you're right. Human nature is a big thing, especially with college football players, right? These are guys that are in college, they've got other things going on too. And I think the natural inclination is, okay, we just smacked UCF, we beat Texas, like we're it. Like we're the best thing since sliced bread. And I think that lends into maybe a little bit of slippage that can happen to get caught off guard, where maybe you do go in not taking a team as seriously because you beat a team that Kansas beat by a lot and you beat them by a lot too. And so I think it's one of those where I think we talked early in the season about KU winning games and having teaching tape where the
Sure.
coaches can point during film review, other things like that, really point to, hey, this is where we need to be better. Guys, we've been preaching this to you all year, and here it is rearing its ugly head. I think those are the moments that for me, I'm like, yeah, probably not great for KU that Brent Venables could go stand up in front of the team and highlight a lot of those plays. And I think Oklahoma is an impressive team. I think they're a really good team,
Yeah.
and I don't think they're perfect though. And I'll be really interested to see how KU tries to attack them because I think this is a team that KU has been able to fight with. I think you think back to last year, right? In the long run, that was where KU was kind of within two scores, kind of the whole game, but was able to keep pace offensively. Obviously, in 2021, KU was looking good, and then the Caleb Williams play, which is just still so weird,
Yeah.
changes the momentum of the game. And so, I mean, KU and Oklahoma have played closer games than KU has against other Big 12 teams, right?
Yeah.
Oklahoma State has consistently blown KU out. Iowa State has given KU some trouble. I think there are a lot of teams in the conference, Texas too, to some degree, right? In terms of the last 12 months. And Oklahoma's a team that KU's been able to keep up with. So I'm interested to see how KU tries and attack this Oklahoma team just because watching them against UCF, they didn't look like a team that, at least to me, you're like, oh my gosh, nobody can beat them.
Yeah, they didn't run the ball well early, and obviously you look at what Kansas was able to do. I thought against Oklahoma State, like we talked about, that are starting to look banged up on the defensive line. I thought the second level didn't play well; they were
Mm.
steps slow. Maybe that bye week helps you out a little bit there in terms of that. Oklahoma's not a dominant running team, and I think that's maybe a little bit of a difference from what they had last year with Eric Gray.
Yeah.
In terms of they could really line up and had a really good single back that would hurt you. Another area I think they're a little bit weaker at wide receiver this year, especially after the loss of Andrell Anthony for the season. And so last year, when you watch that game, Swain, because I think this is going to be one of the most interesting parts to watch. Oklahoma really clubbed Kansas with its tempo. They didn't allow them to sub. They had
Hmm.
big plays, were running up to the line, getting the next plays off before Kansas could sub. Kansas a little bit deeper, coming off the bye week where they've had a little bit of time, to rest and recuperate. How do you think that tempo winds up impacting this game?
I mean, it's hard, man. Like,
Yeah,
it is one of the Achilles heels for KU, period. Right. I think you look at the teams that have run tempo against KU, whether it be Oklahoma State, right, in the last game. You look at UCF and the job that KU was able to do against that offense, but then you still look up in the end and, they're able to put up 20 or more points. You go back to last year, Texas Tech, Oklahoma. I think even Texas has gone up tempo at times against KU to change the pace. And I asked Lance Leipold about this on Monday about, is there a point where guys get comfortable going against it where maybe it doesn't look so awkward as I think it does at times? And he felt like yes, but I still say that they've got to really work on being aligned right, because I
Yeah.
think Oklahoma still has that team speed element that can make guys miss. They've got the talent, even if it's not the A+ talent that I think some of those Lincoln Riley teams had on the offensive side of the ball. So it's going to be a challenge. And I think generally, Kevin, this is a game KU needs to show up in. There can't be a slow start. There
Yep.
can't be. KU's got to come out of the gates hard and hot and really attack. And KU can't get down, because if that happens, then Oklahoma's going downhill. It's hard to stop. KU's going to have to press at that point, and KU's got to come out hard. And they've been better at that at home games, but I just have not super convinced yet with the way that they've started games.
Yeah, and this is one of those games where it's really important for the defense to come out really early,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't get behind that 8 ball of tempo, because it keeps rolling. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you start off, you face 10 plays on your first drive, you face 12 plays on your second drive, and that's not just important at that point where your guys are coming off the sidelines, like, man, we just faced a bunch of plays. It's important in the fourth quarter when all of that is accumulated, and there hasn't been the rest, and different things like that. I think that's also why it's important. I know it sounds obvious to say the offense and the defense have to play well, but we always talk about complementary football. And this
Mm.
is one of those games where the easiest way to control tempo is to hold on to the ball yourself. And, Kansas is a team that, when I feel like they've been at their best, they've been really good at controlling the ball, and running the ball, and doing things like that. What they can't have happen is they can't have a situation like Texas where they have the odd explosive play and then not a whole lot in between. They can't
Yeah.
have the Oklahoma State running game where Oklahoma State was able to kind of dare you and say, "Hey, you're going to throw the ball on us maybe, but you're not going to run the ball on us." Kansas
Mm.
needs to run the ball in this game, and I think Oklahoma knows it. I think Kansas knows it. I think Oklahoma is probably going to try and align guys to stop it, but at the same time, it's not something Kansas can go without. I think if you're looking at this and you're looking at the post game stats, and Kansas put the ball in the air 45 times, you're going to say Kansas lost, and so I do think it's a game where, even if Oklahoma is putting 8 guys in the
Mhm.
box, or whatever else, Kansas needs to be able to find some success
Yeah.
with that ball control, with running the ball a little bit. I think that's going to be a huge factor.
Yeah, and I think so much of it is kind of the blueprint for that UCF
Yeah.
game, where that is the best KU has started a game this season, maybe under Lance Leipold, right? The way
Yeah.
that they came out offensively, set the tone, defensively came out and did not let UCF get into that tempo. And I look at that formula, and I think it's exactly what KU has to do. They got to get the stop first, they got to score, and then get another stop. The tempo, right? You're so right. It's like a snowball, right? When it starts
Yeah.
getting downhill, it is really hard to stop and get that momentum halted. And so, starting fast is huge. And I think you'd hope that with the atmosphere of this game, right? Big noon kickoff, which we'll talk about in a second, being there, um, you'd think that the students will be out for this one, and that maybe it'll be a sellout. It isn't at this point in time, but again, it's Monday. We'll see how it progresses through the week, but it's a crowd that still will be juiced, and you'd like to think that KU will come out and start really well, but it's just not been guaranteed. And so I think that for me is the biggest key. Can they win the first quarter? Because if they can,
Yeah.
then I think this is a 4-quarter game. But if it's a game where, like last year, where they fall behind early and are trying to fight back, it's just hard to come over that hill when you've got to get multiple stops, multiple scores consecutively when the other team has momentum.
Jason Bean played well last year,
Mhm.
but Kansas came up empty on a possession here, a possession there, and they were chasing the rabbit the rest of the game. It was what it was, and they can't put themselves in that position again. So I have to ask you,
Mm.
and I'm going to ask you straight up, because we don't do this enough, in our profession, is just ask the straight up question: does Jalen Daniels play and/or start on Saturday?
I'll put on my Lance Leipold mask here. I
Uh-oh.
don't know.
Uh-oh.
Look, I think it's as simple as this. This is a back injury, and I think there are
Yeah.
multiple things at play here. Yes, Jalen Daniels is able to do more. Lance Leipold has said that. Does that mean he's getting the starting reps to be the starter? Because I think what is paramount above everything else is preparation,
Yep.
right? I think you've seen that when this coaching staff has time to dial up a game plan for the quarterback, they're really good, right?
Yep.
And when they don't, it's when things kind of look a little off. And I think that's exactly what that Texas game was. And that for me is the big question. KU didn't practice on Monday, practiced on Sunday night. That's their first practice of the week. The most important practices are really kind of Tuesday and Wednesday. Wednesday is the big third down day. At least that's my understanding. And so if Jalen is able to get those reps on Tuesday and Wednesday, then yeah, he will start. But if this is a situation where he didn't show enough on Sunday to get the requisite reps on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, then he's not going to start, because I think the coaching staff has to focus on who can give us the best chance of winning. Not can we have our starting quarterback back, because he may not give K the best chance of winning if he hasn't had a full week of practice where he's been able to show you that he is back to being there. And so, look, the Missouri State game could end up being the right comparison. It could be a deal where he is ready to go, where against Missouri State, he was available, but Jason Bean throughout the course of the week got the first team reps because he was the one that was ready to get that. And they built the game plan around him. And then the following week, Jalen Daniels got those reps to start. They built a game plan around him, and he kicked butt. And so Monday, I can't give you the answer, Kevin, as much as I'd love to. And I don't think anybody can, because nobody knows, right? Tuesday, Wednesday, really crucial days. And of course, got to make sure there's no setback as well as you're ramping things up and continuing to add more to Jalen Daniels' plate. So I'm fascinated to see, Kevin. I'll be honest, man.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer, but I
I think that
love to see
the
it.
the trust is so important
Mm,
because I think when you looked at last year when Jalen Daniels came back against Texas,
mm.
the game plan suggested they did not trust Jalen Daniels to be Jalen Daniels just yet.
Yep.
When there were bootlegs off of handoffs and things like that, those were gives. Jalen Daniels was not keeping that ball, and so Jalen was out there, but it wasn't really Jalen Daniels. It wasn't like operating with him out there. Now you look at this year, the game plan against Illinois when he
Hmm.
came back, after not playing against Missouri State. That was a game plan where they trusted Jalen to be Jalen. Jalen was able to run the ball at certain spots. He was asked to run the ball at certain spots. And so I think that's the other thing that we have to look at too is, it's not just, hey, can Jalen go out and play on Saturday? It's can Jalen do the things that
Hmm.
separate him from Jason Bean?
Yeah, that can put KU in a position to win.
Sure.
Because if Jalen's out there and he's got to be careful because the back still may be a little sore, or he's tentative, KU's not winning.
Yep.
Like, KU needs the quarterback to be ready to go and play one of the best games of their career to win this game. It's as simple as that. And so, who that is, right, is kind of the question. And that's what is going to be decided this week, which
Yeah.
is not a great answer. I know fans want to know, and I want to know, right?
Sure. Sure.
I,
That's why I asked. That's why I asked. I had to put that out there.
yeah. So we'll see. But Kevin, let's get to Big Noon Kickoff,
Sure.
pregame show. KU is one of, I believe, the number from Andy Eich, the great sports information director for KU football. Put it out there that I believe KU is one of 5 teams over the last 2 seasons that has hosted both ESPN and Fox's college football pregame shows. It's a big deal. This is a show that, in terms of ratings, is challenging
Yep.
College Game Day, right? It's not quite there yet in terms of consistent ratings, but there are weeks in which Big Noon Kickoff does better than Game Day. And it's a big opportunity for KU here to continue to get another one of these this one's 2 hours, but a 2-hour infomercial for KU football. And it's going to lead
Yep.
into the Big Noon Kickoff game, which has rated really well. What do you kind of think about the opportunity KU has here? Because I think it's great that KU has it, but also they've got to capitalize, I feel like.
Sure. And that doesn't even necessarily mean win. When you look at last
Mm.
year in College Game Day, you know, while Kansas obviously would have loved to win that game against TCU, I think being there on the final drive, playing the way that they did, I
Mhm.
think was a tremendous infomercial for KU. It's kind of like we've talked about on this show what an infomercial the Liberty Bowl was. Even though Kansas lost that game, the way that they played, how exciting they were, all the different things there, all of that was positive. And so, yeah, I do think there are things that matter beyond the show being there. Like you said, you can host the show and you lose 42-10. It's not going to be the best look.
No,
And
a lot
so,
of people watching.
yeah, and so I also think it's important that people turn up, and they sell this thing out, and to have a game this week, and I know some people will probably point to the ticket prices going up and everything else, but I mean that's part of having a good football team, and Kansas has what looks like a pretty good football team at this point,
Mm.
and so when you add all of that together, if Kansas comes out, they're going to do well on the pregame show, right? I mean, Lance Leipold interviews well for that stuff. They've got likable guys, team features, all those different things. If the fans and the students and everybody turns up, they make it a great atmosphere, and KU football shows up on the field. This has a chance to be, closer to a 6-hour infomercial for the program, and
Yeah,
the type of thing that really is tough to duplicate and tough to put a dollar figure to.
100%. And I think this is something that too, you look at the recruiting impact it has. And
Yeah,
look, across the country, people watch the shows in the morning, right? But
yeah,
also big games like this get recruits to show up. We'll have
yeah,
the visitor list later on this week for VIPs that want to see who all is going to be there. But the early word, at least from a couple of guys I've been able to confirm so far, like there are some really good players that are going to be in Lawrence for this game, and being able to show that, hey, on these big stages, Kansas can rise to the occasion and play with one of these big boys, if you will. I don't know what else to call Oklahoma.
yeah,
Um, it's one of those situations where it's just a big opportunity, and I think KU did a good job last year of answering it. It wasn't perfect, right? The first half for
sure.
KU wasn't great. Obviously, the game being on FS1, not necessarily also the biggest stage as well, but with this being a Fox game and having the pregame show lead right into it, the big noon stage is going to, I believe it'll be on the hill, and then they'll transition inside. I believe I haven't seen that fully confirmed yet, but look, the crowd get there early, right? Because they're going to be in there showing out the stadium, even if it's not renovated yet. That'll be covered, I'm sure, during the pregame show. But look, it's just another one of these big opportunities that you hope the whole entire thing, right? Kansas program, Kansas athletics, and Kansas fans are ready to answer, because these chances, right, as we've seen, don't come around very often. Game day came for the first time last year, first time that big noon has come, and you want them to want to come back, because then you get more infomercials and more time on TV, and that stuff is valuable, right? I think you're right. You can't really put a monetary value on it.
Yeah, and you look at the recruiting aspect that you brought up with it. Guys that are already committed, it's confirmation to them of
Mm,
what you've been telling them this whole time.
totally.
When they came in and they visited and you said, "Hey, look, College Game Day visited. We're a program on the rise. People are paying attention. We're getting these renovations. People are talking about that." And I think that's been a big part of this recruiting class, which I think
Mm,
both of us would admit is a really strong one for Kansas at this point. Um, is that they were able to sort of bottle all of that together, right?
yeah.
Going to a bowl game for the first time in a long time,
Mm,
being exciting, having, this fun offense, being able to look at point to College Game Day, then having them in and being able to show them, hey, these are all the different things that we're doing to the facilities, from
mhm.
the football facility to Memorial Stadium itself, and being able to sell kind of, okay, here's what you think you know about Kansas, but here's what we're capable of. And I think that when you're able to draw a big noon kickoff, or a college game day, or something like that, it's confirmation of what you've been telling them. And that's important for the guys who are already in the boat, because I think some of those guys are getting recruited by some other schools,
Mhm.
and have been pretty much from the moment Kansas got them. But it's also important because we've talked about the 2025 class being a strong one locally and all of those things too. And so being able to establish yourself as a legitimate option for these kids. And I think Kansas has really done a lot to do that, both on the field and with all of this extra stuff. I think
Yeah.
it's just huge.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I guess we can probably transition into the recruiting side of things. The
Sure.
bye week is big for that. You know, these coaches don't have the opportunity to go out throughout the course of the season really and get to the commits that are kind of out of the state. And there's also limitations on the number of evaluations you can do where you go watch players in person. And the bye week was really big for that. You know, Lance Leipold was down in Arizona at Desert Edge High School
Yeah.
last Thursday. Here's a good photo with Leipold and Mark and Marcus Carter, the head coaches at Desert Edge, who also, right, have been to Lawrence. They were
Yeah.
with Deshaun Warner, Andre Gibson, and Jonathan Kamara during their official visit in June, which helped KU secure the commitment of Deshaun Warner, who is now the subject of some pretty important interest.
Yeah.
Kevin, right? You know, you look at getting a Michigan offer, which I think we talked about at the time, but you know, Jonathan Kamara got a Michigan offer right before he was going to commit to Kansas, and they tried to say, "Hey, hold off, you know, let us recruit you," and he said, "No, I'm good. I'm going to KU." Well, they waited to offer Deshaun Warner until earlier this month when they offered him because he's having an incredible senior year. He's
Yep.
dominating as a defensive end, and they offered him. And then I believe a couple days later, maybe a week later, Ohio State offers him. And that's a big deal, right? Ohio State isn't necessarily super trigger happy with the offers they do send out. And so KU is doing their best to make sure that Deshaun Warner stays in the class and sending the head coach down to Arizona when he could go anywhere else in the country, right? He's the head coach. Like, that's a big deal to send him down to Arizona to go see the kids and really check in on the school and be seen on the sideline. You know how the rules work.
Sure.
Where he's able to go to the high school game, go watch, get one of those evaluations, check in with the coaches during the daytime, and do a lot of the stuff where you're just seen around the school, right? Make sure the logo and the polo is seen around, and Jordan Peterson was down there as well. So I guess, Kevin, when you see the offers come in for someone like that, right, who obviously had a huge rankings bump, he's now ranked number 174 in the country, one of the top
Regardless of
15.
position,
Yeah,
regardless of
regardless
position.
of position, he's one of the top 15 defensive ends in the country. Like, Deshaun Warner is an elite recruit, and
Yeah.
KU is doing its best to hold on to an elite recruit that they have spent a lot of time and capital recruiting. So when you see those big offers come in, I guess, what are you thinking and what do you look for as time goes on, right, as signing day approaches?
Yeah, I think the Ohio State offer is particularly intriguing just because I realize this isn't 100% accurate, but it feels like every defensive lineman that
Oh, yeah.
goes to Ohio State and puts in the work winds up popping up as a high NFL draft pick on the other side. And let's be clear about this. Deshaun Warner has that kind of potential. That's why he's considered such a high level recruit. Is he's somebody that has the potential to
Mm,
pop up as a high NFL draft pick on the other side if he puts in the work, if he develops and works on his body and all of those things. And so Ohio State, you kind of raise your eyebrows at that one a little bit. I
totally.
think one of the things I would say is the fact that Kansas has 3 commits from Desert Edge. Not He's not the only one. There's
Mhm.
not just one other guy. There's 3 of them. I think you would think that his teammates would kind of be there saying, "Hey, stick it out with us at
Yeah.
Kansas." And I think one of the other things is, Jordan Peterson's done a great job there, but I think this class has done a great job of being really close and kind
Yeah.
of recruiting each other and sticking with each other and everything. It kind of cracked me up. I think one of the first responses under Deshaun Warner tweeting that he had the Ohio State offer was from Carson Brune, a tight end from Iowa, who is committed to Kansas and is basically like, "No, bro, like you know what the move is.
Mhm.
Stay here with Kansas." And so, obviously that's some tough competition to
Yeah.
fight off. But Warner had some major offers before he committed. He had Texas. He had some other ones. like you said, Kamara already had a Michigan offer before he wound up choosing Kansas. One of the weird things about this class is if you go through and look, there's what, 16 commits now, I think?
Yeah.
Something like 6 or 7 of those guys have Michigan offers now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how often can you say that about a Kansas recruiting class? But I do think, I know we just talked about this, but I think it's one of those things where making a bowl game, getting big noon kickoff, like all of these things, stacking these things up where you can go to Deshaun Warner and say, what we told you would happen, we told you A, B, and C.
Mm-hmm.
We told you we'd have a good football team. We've got a good football team. We told you the nation was noticing. Here's the nation noticing. We
Totally.
told you that the facilities improvements were coming. Here are our plans for the facilities. Everything we've told you is checking out. You can come here and build your path to the NFL through here. And I think there's a fairly solid chance that they hold on to him, if they're able to show him all of those things and show him that, hey, all of these things that we told you that were part of the reason that you chose Kansas, along with the
Mm.
relationships that we built with you, the on field stuff is also there for you.
Yeah, 100%. I think it also shows, right, that if you go to Kansas, you will be seen. I
Yep.
think that's one of the big things that I think probably high school kids worry about, right? Is will I be seen? And I think moments like this Saturday show you yes, right?
Yep.
You can be seen. And I think other people would also say, look, the NFL draft doesn't really care where you come from.
Sure.
If you're good and you're putting on really good tape, you will get drafted. Um, I think obviously like program cachet and that does play a role in some of it. But I think generally, if you are good and you dominate your school and you test well and you perform well and interview well, you will be drafted and you'll be drafted highly. So I think it's one of those deals where I think KU can continue to recruit Deshaun off the things that they've told him from the get-go, which is
Sure.
you come here, you'll be able to be put in a position to have success. You can show them Kyron Johnson from the first year and say, hey, look, this is not a guy that fits us. But look how much production he was able to have as an undersized defensive end playing a spot he wouldn't have played usually. You can
Yep.
use someone like Jeremy Robinson as developmental player, right? Over the 3 years that coaching staff has been here, he has improved. You can use someone like Austin Booker to showcase, hey, when we see talent, we can put it in the right position to make an impact from day one. So I think there's a lot of data points that the coaching staff can use. But look, it is Ohio State.
Sure.
And that logo on the side, it does mean a lot. So I don't think anyone would blame Deshaun Warner for going and taking a hard look at Ohio State. I think it's just a fact of recruiting, and offers from a school like this don't come around often. So I think it's a two-way street, right? Where I think equally you can say, yes, Kansas has recruited him for longer, believed in him before a lot of other people, put in the work, has been able to make him feel at home. And that's what the coaches at Desert Edge say, go where you're loved. And they've done all these things. I think on the other hand, you can also say, yeah, it's Ohio State.
Yeah.
I think,
Sure.
yeah, two things can be true at once in this situation. So yeah, and we can get to the newest commit for KU as well. Last week,
Sure.
Thursday evening, David Abajian made his, technically it's a flip, but made his commitment to KU known. He was once committed to Oregon State, decommitted because of conference realignment. KU finished as a very, very close second the first time around. And this is why relationships and not burning bridges is so crucial in recruiting nowadays. You don't know what's going to happen 4, 5, 6 months down the road. You keep contact if a kid is open to being contacted, and you just see where things go. And this is a perfect example of it. So I look at David, and I think he's got a really talented future. If you go look at his tape on Huddle, like he's an athletic guy at 6'5", 270, 275. Doesn't look like someone that is 275 pounds. He looks lighter than that. He moves well. I think it's a really, really good get for KU, and they've now got 4 offensive linemen committed in this class.
Yeah, and you add in Calvin Clements, who they thought was kind of a foundational guy in last year's class
For
too.
sure.
Carter Lavrusky is a guy that moved up our rankings a ton. For those of you who don't know, we have a grading scale. Obviously, everybody
Mm-hmm.
knows the star rankings, but to be a 4-star, you have to have a rating of 90. And Kansas has several guys sort of right on that edge of being, either a high 3-star guy because they're an 89, or being a 4-star guy as a 90. And Lavrusky got a big bump up to an 89. I think he's the number 35 offensive tackle in the country. And so when you add in, guys like David to him, and we have David ranked as an interior offensive lineman. I know that Greg Biggins, in talking about him, has said he can do both. He really thinks that he could stick at tackle at the college level, but also thinks that he's somebody that has the talent and everything that, hey, if you've already got 2 tackles, if for whatever reason tackle isn't working, he's not a guy that has to be a tackle. He can move inside and play guard as well. And so that sort of versatility is nice. And when you add in Lavrusky to Calvin Clements, who, made a spot on the 2 deep, fairly early on, and has a lot of talent and enrolled early. And it seems like Scott Fuchs did a really good job in the last few years in terms of kind of working with what he had on roster, and they filled in the gaps with the transfer here and there. But guys really developed. They really got a lot better under him. And when you look at this class, when you add it to last year's class, it seems like he's going to have a pretty good sized group of guys who have sort of the raw clay, if you will, that you want to work with for offensive linemen.
Yeah, and I think so much too. Like, I'm not getting caught up in what positions these guys are going to play, because I think Scott Fuchs has shown us that the best 5 are going to play, and in whatever order that looks like, it's going to happen. And so, like, for someone like Abajian, if he plays guard during his KU career, I'd say, yep, I could see it. If he plays tackle, I'd say, yep, I could see it. I think it's the same case with Kenny Anene from Minnesota. I think he's another guy that's kind of in that swing area, right? About 6'5" for him.
Got a really long wingspan, has some interesting athletic stuff. And so you say, hey, maybe tackle works out, maybe it doesn't, but I mean, he's got the tools to.
Yeah. And you've seen it, right? With Michael Ford, with Dominic Pooney, guys that have played guard for KU, have played tackle elsewhere, that Scott Fuchs has no issue moving these guys around. And I just think, you look at this class, 4 offensive linemen, it's the most KU's taken since 2020, and they needed to take a big offensive line class because they're going to lose 2 this year. There's a big class kind of coming up here where it's kind of the Michael Ford age, where I think they've got 2 years left. But that's a big class they're going to lose there. And so getting this kind of bigger class where they can really start to get the pipeline going is huge. And look, KU's also had trouble recruiting against Oregon State. I think that's been a consistent thing kind of over the last 14 months. If you pay really close attention to it, which not everybody does, but Oregon State's a school that has recruited well against KU, at least in recruiting some of the similar players. So for KU, getting a quality player like Abajian, who KU was also early on, right, an early offer. They offered him in August of 2022. So before the start of his junior season is when they offered him. So I think this is a really good evaluation for KU, and just a really good job recruiting, where they built a really good relationship with him, and it paid off in the end.
Yeah, I think when you looked at this class, you wanted to add a lot of higher end defensive talent because you felt like, maybe you didn't have as much in the program, just generally speaking. You wanted a big offensive line class, and you wanted to find a quarterback. And I think that when you look at that defensive class, I include, in addition to Sean Warner, I think Austin Alexander is a 4-star caliber guy. He's a really talented cover corner that I'm really excited about seeing at the next level. They've got several guys kind of in that range defensively. We talked about the offensive line guys. And then you add in a guy like Isaiah Marshall, who, is kind of, fits your tag of quarterback of the future. What's been your thought on Isaiah and, where he kind of fits in at Kansas?
Yeah, I think he's been really good. It'll be a really good fit for when he gets to KU. I think you watch the way he throws, the way he runs. It's similar to Jalen Daniels. And look, his track times are pretty elite too.
Yeah.
anytime you're running sub 11-second 100 meters, like that's going to catch people's attentions. And then you do it as a quarterback who also has some really good arm talent. Like it's a guy that is really, really special. I think height is probably his biggest knock, and that's fine, right? He's KU has shown that they can do it with guys that aren't 6'3", 6'2". So
Yeah.
I think he's going to fit in just fine. He's an early enrollee. We're starting to get a picture of what the early enrollees look like. Obviously, we'll keep you updated on the VIP board about that as signing day gets closer and guys kind of make that big decision of, am I ready? Because KU does demand that those early enrollees are players.
Yeah.
There's no grace period, right? There's grace period in terms of practice and understanding what you're doing, but in terms of habits, in terms of being asked to come in and be a college football player from day one, it's a lot to ask. And I think someone like Calvin Clemens has shown that when you go in with the right mindset and the right mentality and you take it day by day and don't get focused on, the bigger picture, if I need to be at this spot, you can have success. And the coaching staff has also shown that if you come in and show that you're able to contribute, they'll put you in a position where you're on the travel roster, like Calvin Clemens has been for every single game. So I think I think Dak Brinkley is one that's going to enroll early as well, a
Yeah.
4-star defensive end. KU's going to have some young freshmen coming in that are going to be hungry to compete, and I'm excited to see those guys in person in spring practice.
Yeah, and I think those guys usually you see a jump from them from the strength and conditioning standpoint too. They come in.
Totally.
I shouldn't say they come in at a higher level. They come into the summer at a higher level. When the other freshmen arrive, they are ahead of those guys because they've already been working with Gildersleeve. And I think Gildersleeve, you hit the nail on the head when you talked about habits, because Gildersleeve is really good at developing strength. I think he's pretty good at developing speed and different things physically. I think more than all of that, the thing that makes Gildersleeve a really good strength coach and a big part of the reason Kansas has had a lot of success as a program is he really, really just bores down into those habits and what you do every single day to make yourself better. And so I think, if I were a freshman who was looking to play, usually you'd want to come in early to learn the playbook and things like that. I think that added time around the program and developing the kinds of habits and everything that they look for is just,
Yeah.
arguably just as important, if not more so.
Well, look, in practice for KU is pretty chaotic. Like, I don't
Yeah,
think fans,
sure.
obviously are not allowed to practice, but like for us that are able to go, like you see how chaotic it is and it's very rhythmic. I think the first couple of days of spring practice, when there are the newcomers right from the transfer portal, there are the new early enrollees, um, it looks a certain way. And then by the time spring practice is over, it looks a different way. And then
Yeah,
by the time camp comes around, it is lickety split. Everybody knows where they're going. There are a lot of drills that get done. Everybody's getting practice reps during spring, during camp. Like there isn't a guy like that just stands around for 2 hours and doesn't do anything, right? Like guys are
yeah,
getting reps, and I think that takes a minute to get used to. And it's why I think someone like Keaton Kubeka as well is a really good example of someone that he didn't even enroll early, but he came from a high school that was so advanced in the preparation in Austin
yeah,
Westlake, right? One of the best high school programs in the country, where he knew how to prepare every day.
yeah,
And then there are other guys that come in and don't, because obviously high school football is different in every state, in every city, in every high school. So that range is different. And someone like Dak Brinkley, for example, playing at Katy, like they are a very, very good program,
yeah,
right? And he will show up at KU knowing what it looks like to win. And he'll know what that looks like. And so that'll be maybe an easier transition if I had to guess for him in that regard. And so I think it's all really interesting once you get into kind of the roster building and team building side of
sure.
it. But yeah, I don't know. Any final thoughts on recruiting before we get out of here?
No, no, I don't think so. I think, when you look at it, I'm not saying they're 100% done because guys can pop up that you didn't expect to
Mhm.
pop up. And, you know, guys can reopen that you didn't expect to reopen and all of those different things. But would you agree that Kansas is mostly done at this point and that, the spots that they are going to have are possibly more going to be allocated toward the transfer portal?
I think so. I think you look at the numbers, right? I think KU's guaranteed to lose 15.
Yeah,
Scholarship players, it could be 16 depending on Ronald McGee. And then you look at a 16-man class, like scholarship wise, that lines up. And then you're looking at, it being an one out, one in type of situation.
sure.
after the season ends. So yeah, I think so. But also this coaching staff has shown that if there's a really good player out there that wants to go to Kansas, um,
They'll find a
they'll
way.
make it work if they think it's a fit, right? I don't think anyone this time last year thought Jacoby Davis was going to be in KU's class, a cornerback from Texas. And sure enough, it happens in January where he's still available, looking for a spot, and KU has a spot to, I guess initially they were going to gray shirt, and then happens over the summer where he's able to come in on time and it works out. So I think this KU staff is not afraid to get creative if there's a really talented player that wants to be at KU. But I think in terms of needs, like what does Kansas need to do in this high school class, I think they got it.
Yeah, yeah. I think, I'm not sure the average person realizes how much Kansas could feasibly have come back next year. I
Mm.
mean, Jalen Daniels still has time. Devin Neal, Daniel Highshaw still have time. Your top three wide receivers have time. Three of your starting offensive linemen, I believe. When you look at that, the defensive lineman, I think the only one they would lose is
Phillips. Well,
Phillips.
and Hatcher
Yeah, Phillips and Hatcher. So
and
you look at
Joyner.
the fact that you could return both Jeremy Robinson and Austin Booker and most of your defensive end or tackle
Mhm.
rotation. You lose Rich Miller, but bring back J.B. Brown, Tyrone Berry. I'm not saying all of these guys are coming back. I'm saying all of these guys could come back. You look at Jacoby Bryant, and just guys across the secondary too. And so that's where some of the challenges with some of this roster building, I think, too, is like you said, right now the number's at 15. You look at all those guys, does Kobe Bryant stay another year or,
Mm.
does he make a jump? Devin Neal, with all the success that he's had, does he go early? Jalen Daniels has had a full college career. He could have another year, but he's had a full college career. Does he decide to come back? And there are a lot of those guys kind of sprinkled around the roster. So what's 15 right now, like I don't want anybody to be watching this or listening to this thinking, oh my gosh, we're one scholarship over. No, there's going to be some movement there somewhere where some of these spots wind up opening up, and so you're going to have, a few portal guys here and there. I don't know specifically, hey, it's going to be guys A, B, and C, but I
Mhm.
do think that, you're going to have some openings here for Kansas to kind of attack things a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's just how it works in
Yeah,
modern college sports, where I think guys are going to think it's I'm good, with the
yeah,
COVID years too, right? Some of
sure.
these guys have been in college a long time,
Yeah.
and some of them sometimes you're just ready to be done. And I think the way that a season finishes can change opinions. I saw it in my time covering Iowa State, where I think a lot of guys after 2020 thought they're going to leave. And then the way the season ends, they decide, yeah, one more run. And so I think things can still change. They're in flux. And obviously, I
Yeah.
think that we're a long way away from that. Still 5 weeks and potentially a bowl game to go for KU. But um, Kevin, I
And,
think
and we
that's
saw Jason Bean change based on the
yeah.
final play of the bowl game, basically. And so yeah, it's one of those things that's going to be in flux. But if you're worried, if you're saying, oh my gosh, Kansas needs to add blah blah to get better, those spots are probably going to be there.
Yeah, exactly right. And these are just conversations for December, so let's not get too
Oh,
ahead of
sure. Yeah,
ourselves
yeah.
here.
Not this
Um,
anyway, the Oklahoma game. So
yeah, no,
so
I
so I
think
will ask,
yeah,
not necessarily from a prediction standpoint, but we saw last year Kansas came off the bye week
mhm,
exceptionally well, right? They looked fresh for the first time in like a month,
mhm.
and they just absolutely put it on Oklahoma State. I'm
That
not
was
saying
missing
Kansas.
that was missing 8 starters.
Yeah, yeah.
I
I'm
can't
I'm not saying
that's
Kansas is going to put it on Oklahoma, but I am saying that I think this is very interesting heading into this
mm,
game off the bye week, potentially maybe having extra time for a guy like Jalen Daniels to heal up, where this game winds up going this weekend. And if Kansas is able to throw a scare into Oklahoma or even beat Oklahoma to
mm,
gain bowl eligibility, all of a
yeah.
sudden, you're looking at a situation where I'm not saying they're going to the Big 12 title game, but that's something that's still in play, which is crazy to say.
Yeah, I mean, that shows you the Big 12. But yeah, I think,
Yeah.
right. I've said this before, Kevin. Offense is about scheme, defense is about talent. And
Yep.
for KU, the chance to have extra time to come up with the game plan for Oklahoma, for the offense, for Andy Koldenek, I think it's big. Trying to find ways to attack them, right? Positive. I think on the other side, KU's defense should be able to play faster, right? And I think you're able to play to your ceiling um, more consistently when you are fresh, right? I think we saw that early in the year. I think the Illinois game is a great example of that, where Illinois was a big physical offensive line and KU just kind of dominated. And I think coming into this game with the extra rest, getting someone like, Austin Booker time to heal after
Sure.
he played on one knee, the linebackers getting time to rest and recover and recuperate, and just everybody in general being able to enter this game fresh. I think that's just huge. Like, does it mean the difference? No, but could it mean making a big play when a big play is needed or having the legs to do it in the fourth quarter? I think that's going to help. But yeah, I think the bye week for KU coming before this game in particular um, should help, right? In terms of just
Yep.
making it be more of a competitive contest.
Sure. And I think, you look at the Texas game, and to be quite honest, it wasn't
Mhm.
that competitive of a game, but the score was relatively close into the third quarter. And, even though Texas kind of had to help with that a little bit in terms of making some mistakes and things like that,
Yeah.
if Kansas can hang around in this game and make it a four-quarter game where kind of all the pressure is on Oklahoma, and specifically all the pressure is on an Oklahoma team that hasn't won a Big 12 title in a few years. This isn't
Yeah.
this isn't an Oklahoma team that, everybody on that team is accustomed to winning those games. And
Mhm.
so I think that there's a very real chance here, if Kansas can hang around, that Kansas makes this thing very uncomfortable for Oklahoma. And in that case, it's kind of anybody's game.
Yeah, exactly. I think just get it to the fourth quarter, have it be one of the coin flip games, right? I think that's something we talked
Yeah.
about a lot was games like Oklahoma State, Illinois being some of those coin flip games. And I think if you can get to the fourth quarter, one possession, make it a coin flip game. Maybe Dylan
Yep.
Gabriel throws you the ball. Maybe a guy fumbles it. Maybe someone muffs a punt. Maybe your special teams makes a big play. Get into those games where one score and you just don't know what can happen. So I think that's gonna be huge. And if KU can do it, I think that's great, right? It's about 11-point spread around there. I wonder how the quarterback situation, if it becomes more clearly in the week, how does that impact the betting spread? But I think it's a game that KU's just gotta keep it close, gotta get it to the fourth quarter, being one score and being in the game because anything can happen at that point.
I don't know that we're going to get any clarity on the Jalen
Oh
Daniels
yeah,
thing.
we will. Oh yeah,
You
we
think
will.
so?
Pete Thamel is gonna tweet it on Thursday, Friday, or
Oh
Saturday.
yeah, that's
He'll
that's
have it.
probably true. That's
He'll have
probably true.
it. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, he'll have
Just in time to flip those betting lines around before everything happens.
Yeah, well, at least we've not gotten Jalen Daniels is. I'm not gonna whatever. I'm not gonna get into it. I'm gonna save myself. I'm good. I'm good.
All right, all right.
Any
Well,
final
that's
thoughts,
it. That
Kevin?
seems like a good place to end, Swain.
Yeah, so I don't get in trouble. I'm good. All right. Thanks as always for listening to the Fog.net podcast. Please leave us a rating or review on iTunes if you like what you heard. We'll be back with a podcast later this week, I believe Thursday morning, with James D. Jackson from our Oklahoma website. We're going to link up and do a fun podcast and learn a little bit more about Oklahoma, kind of what the season's been like for them after a really down year last year. So that should be really good. If you're watching on YouTube, hey, make sure you're subscribed to the videos. Make sure you're liking them, dropping comments. All those things go a long way in helping us with the algorithm, which therefore helps us get to more people and more people can find out about Kevin and I talking about Lord knows what for an hour when I thought this was going to be 30 minutes. But that's what makes this podcast fun, Kevin, is that we get going and then we just keep going. And I think it's great. So thank you as always for listening to the Fog.net podcast. We will be back next Sunday. We're doing it on Sunday. We'll be back
Yeah.
with another podcast. Thanks as always. Hope everyone has a great week.